What up, world? This is Dominic, Syracuse, and welcome to episode 3 of our brand new segment, Shit I Learned in Prison. Originally, I wasn't sure how this segment was going to be received, being that we're mainly a comedy channel, but after reading all of the heartwarming comments about how much this segment has meant to all of you and all of the incredible stories that you've been telling me, I'm so glad we did this, and I encourage you to keep going. There's nothing more exciting and empowering for me than to read all of your thoughts with all of this, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's all about sharing our stories and helping each other out in whatever way we can. One of the things I love most about this channel is hearing your stories and hearing your feedback and learning about you. Know that even if I don't respond, I promise you I read every single comment, and each one of them inspires me just as much as you claim I inspire you. So thank you. Now, for the rest of you wondering when the heck the comedy's coming back, I promise it's on its way. We are filming season 2 of the Dominus Manifesto right now as we speak. We're going to have a whole bunch of crazy stuff, even crazier than the first season. However, if you want to go back and check out the first season, you can click the link right here. Check that out after this video though. But for today, I want to take you back to prison. If this is your first time watching the segment, for the past 5 years, I have been using acting and improv techniques to teach behavioral therapy in maximum security prison. We discussed how movement is intimately related to mood. And by changing what your body's doing, you can actually change the way you feel. We also talked about how if it looks stupid, you're doing it right. And that's what we found to be so liberating. The crazier we moved, the more we felt like kids again. The more we felt like kids again, the more we were able to open up and laugh and play like children again. And by freeing our bodies, we were able to free our minds, no matter what prison we found ourselves in. But for today's episode, I wanted to give you a little bit of insider information. I wanted to give you a few insider stories that I've seen firsthand of systematic corruption. Now, it's sort of become a hot button topic. This idea of the prison being a for-profit institution. There's a slew of movies that have been released, such as 13th on Netflix, Just Mercy, or The Hurricane with Denzel Washington, that all seem to center around the same topic, which is innocent people being incarcerated and the system benefiting from that financially. Now, in this episode, I want to break this off in 2 separate segments. First, I want to talk about how I've witnessed the system use incarceration to gain profits for itself. And second, I want to tell you about the innocent people that I've seen be incarcerated by a broken system and then have to fight tooth and nail against that very system to prove their innocence. First, let's start with prisons making a profit off of those incarcerated. For those who don't know, the 13th Amendment is famous for freeing the slaves. It specifically said nobody can make money off free labor unless those doing the labor are incarcerated. Because of this, when people are incarcerated, they have an option to do workforce training, where they do things like sew, make license plates, make glasses, things of this nature, and somebody actually gets to keep the profits off of these products sold. Now, as I've said, you could watch a ton of documentaries or YouTube videos detailing that, so I'm not going to get into that too deeply. What I am going to tell you about is something you probably had no idea of, and that is the prison economics of ramen noodles. When I first started teaching in the prisons, I had no idea how important ramen noodles were. The people inside use ramen for everything. They don't have access to a lot of ingredients, so if they want to do any home cooking, ramen noodles serves as the base to a multitude of meals. I'm talking about casseroles, pizzas, and enchiladas. I gotta be real, I'm not supposed to have done this, but I did try a prison tamale one time. It was unbelievable. They crunched up the ramen noodles, cooked it up to make like the masa, crumbled Doritos inside of it, rolled it up, and then cooked it over a hot water heater. it was like a sodium explosion. It was pretty dope. Pretty dope. You have to understand, the food in jail isn't exactly what you want to eat. Every morning they pretty much get hard-boiled eggs, some toast, and orange juice. And then for lunch, it's sandwiches and chips, and then for dinner, it's whatever gruel is cooked up. Not exactly the most nutritional food in the world, but then again, it's prison. What do you expect? However, they do have a magazine that they call the Commissary. It comes around and it's essentially like a dollar store that they can order from. The stuff on there might be what you get at a dollar store. I'm talking about canned meats, small bags of Cheetos, and of course, ramen noodles. However, it doesn't cost as much as the dollar store. One pack of ramen noodles, one pack can cost as much as $1.75. Now, I don't know if you've ever been broke or in college, but nowhere on earth does a pack of ramen noodles cost $1.75. In fact, anywhere you go, ramen noodles are like 10 cents a pack. Me buying ramen noodles is just about the only time I can feel like I'm balling. Because I can buy as much as we want. Which really goes over good with my son because he loves ramen noodles. And when we go to the store, he thinks that daddy is rich. I'm serious, when he was little, our favorite thing to do was to go to the store and go to the ramen noodle section, and I'd say, "How much do you want, buddy?" And he'd say, "How much can we get?" And I'd say, "I tell you what, why don't you lie down in this cart and I'll just bury you in ramen noodles." And we would. He'd lie down at the bottom of the cart and we'd just pile it up, and then we'd go to the cashier and make them pick the ramen noodles out one at a time until he jumped out of the box and was like, "Rah!" He loved it. And I bought maybe 100 ramen noodles, spent a total of like $3.97, including tax. I was telling my son about how they use ramen noodles to make everything in prison, and I said, "You know, they use ramen noodles for everything. They even make pizzas and enchiladas out of them." And he was like, "Oh, cool. I want to go to prison." Immediately I was like, I f***ed up. I f***ed that one up. But genuinely think about that. If ramen noodles cost 10 cents a pack for us, that means the manufacturer makes them at about what, maybe 1 cent, maybe 2? They're selling them in jail for $1.75. Even if they're paying cost, what we pay at 10 cents, that means they're making $1.65 per ramen noodle. That's over 1,000% increase. There were over 6,000 people in the jail that I worked at, and believe me when I say every one of them had ramen noodles. So if each person in the jail only had one pack of ramen noodles, that makes prison a multi-million-dollar industry on ramen noodles alone. And let me tell you, people didn't have just one pack of ramen noodles. Because ramen noodles are so valuable inside, they don't just use them for food, they use them for currency. They call them soups. I would hear it all the time. They'd say, "Hey man, I'll give you 2 soups for that." Or, "Oh, don't take away my pencil, Mr. D. That cost me 3 soups." So when I would see guys walking around with bags full of ramen noodles, all I could do was think about how much money the prison made off of each one of those guys in just soups alone. So based off that, it becomes really easy to see how prisons can make a ton of money off of incarcerated individuals. Now let's talk about how the system has built itself around incarcerating as many people as possible. As I said before, there are tons of documentaries and YouTube videos about innocent people being incarcerated and still pleading guilty. You might ask yourself, how the heck is that possible? I mean, if you're an innocent person, why would you ever plead guilty to a crime and go to a horrible place like prison? The natural conclusion is they must be lying, right? Actually, no. Don't get me wrong. Believe me when I say there are plenty of people who are incarcerated that absolutely deserve to be. However, I have seen firsthand some people who aren't only innocent, they've been forced into incarceration against their will due to their poverty. Let me backtrack a second and give you some staggering statistics. The United States has more people incarcerated than every other major nation combined. India and China have over 1 billion people, and yet we have more people in our prison systems than both of those countries put together. Now, the average age of a prisoner is 26 years old, and the average reading level of a prisoner is 3rd grade. This gives you a really good idea about where crime comes from. That's why I went in to do what I do. I taught acting on behalf of a high school that, when they found these statistics out, went in to make sure that these people incarcerated got their high school diplomas. Now, if you're an adult with a reading level of 3rd grade, it's going to be very difficult for you to get a job that's above minimum wage, unless it's a job that involves crime. So many of the people that were incarcerated dropped out of school at a really young age, started making money on the streets, and that's how they fell into the crimes they were committing. But this causes a massive problem, not just in people committing crimes themselves, but in prisons becoming overcrowded. You see, after someone serves a sentence for their crime, they get released. However, 88% of people who get released come right back to prison. Now, this is for a few reasons. One, we still put violent offenders with non-violent offenders. So that means if you go to jail for a non-violent crime, you are put into a cage with extremely violent people. This forces you to become violent to survive, and when you leave, the majority of people who were originally incarcerated for a non-violent crime end up coming back violent offenders. What we're really doing isn't rehabilitating people, it's making better criminals. But number 2, without a high school diploma, you really don't have a lot of options to make money. On top of that, you now have a criminal record, making it almost impossible to get a job. So you go from being incarcerated to being homeless. Now, your options are try to go legit, try to find any kind of job that'll work for you in any way despite your record and your lack of education, or go back to doing what it is you know best and making tons and tons of tax-free money by selling drugs or stealing. Now, you'd think that if people were really interested in cleaning up the streets, they would put more money into education, because the more schools we have and the more opportunities we have for people in these situations, the more they can get educations, the better jobs they can get, and the more they can alleviate themselves from the poverty that creates crime. However, that's not the case. In the state of California alone, over the past 30 years, we have built over 30 new jails. Just as a fun game, try to guess how many universities we built. Go ahead, take a guess. What was that? Did I hear what? 6? No. 20? Good guess. 30? No. That's how many prisons I said. 2. We have built 2 schools in comparison to 30 prisons. The taxpayer pays over $150,000 per year per inmate, and we are just pumping more money into the prison system. More money, more money, more money. And yet, programs for education keeps getting cut and cut and cut and cut. So now you can see why education is so important, especially when it leads to poverty, which leads to crime. But how does the system benefit off this? Well, simply put, the poorer the people are, the easier they are to incarcerate. Let me tell you about a student I had inside named Kenneth. When Kenneth started coming to my classes, he was one of the most depressed people I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't even see what his face looked like for the first month or so he was in class, because every day he'd come in, he'd just sit down and do this. His hair was mangy, his beard was distraught. Finally, I went up to him one day and said, "Hey man, I'm glad you're in class, but you're really gonna need to participate if you wanna stay in here." He looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, I'm just so depressed." I said, "Okay, would you like to talk about it?" And he says, "Nah man, you wouldn't believe me. try to tell everybody in here that I didn't do it and I'm innocent, and no one believes me. That's what everybody says. And I said, okay, well, I tell you what, this is acting class. We get up in front of people and we tell stories. So how about this? Tomorrow, I want you to get up in front of us and I want you to tell your story. And it doesn't matter if it's true or false. All that matters is that you share your story to all of us and just let us hear what it is you have to say. He goes, okay. And this is what he said. Kenneth was a college graduate. He got his bachelor's degree in biology and he was 24 years old. He just graduated college from a school in Mississippi and was spending the summer with his sister in California before he had to join the workforce. Now, like many a college kid, Kenneth liked to drink. So he went out to the bars and got hammered. He got so hammered that the Uber driver took him home and he wasn't sure which house was his sister's. So he ended up going to the neighbor's house. He tried to use the key to open the door. It wouldn't open. So he went around and started banging on the windows. Eventually he thought, it's late, I'm tired, I'm just gonna bust one of these windows, crawl through, go to sleep, and I'll pay my sister back for the window in the morning. Admittedly, a very drunken thing to think. But he did. He busted the window, crawled in, and simply went to sleep on the couch. Now, I add this detail because it becomes very important to the story. Kenneth was black. The house that he had broken into was an elderly white family, and from their perspective, all they heard was a big black man banging on the window saying, hey, open up, and then smashing it. So they didn't see what was going on. They immediately hid and called the police. When the police arrived, they found Kenneth, window broken, sleeping on the couch, and the family in the room. When they woke Kenneth up, he was really confused. They told him that they had to take him into jail. They took Kenneth into the station, and after patting him down, found out that he had a pocket knife in his pocket. So they took it away from him and put him in a holding cell. He got his one call, he called his sister, he explained what was going on. She explained it to her neighbors. She came, bailed him out. He paid the neighbors back for the window, and he thought everything was okay. In fact, the neighbors laughed it off once their window was repaired and then dropped all charges. However, the district attorney heard about the case and picked it up. What that means is, even though the family whose house was broken into understood the situation and wanted to drop the charges, the DA said that the city of Los Angeles was still going to continue with the charges. They came to Kenneth's sister's house, picked up Kenneth, told him that he was under arrest and that he was being charged with breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and because of that knife that he had, conspiracy to commit murder. Kenneth was shocked. He said that he felt like he was in some sort of nightmare or a horror movie. He said, I'm not a murderer. I have no interest in murdering anybody. I'm a young kid from Mississippi. We have pocket knives in Mississippi. It's just a thing. The district attorney said, you can't prove that. You can't prove that you didn't break into that house with the intent of murdering those people, and just because you were so drunk, passed out, and weren't able to. Kenneth was horrified. So they took him into a room and they offered him a plea deal. Now, right away when Kenneth was telling this story, all of the other students started erupting. They started going, oh, they did that to me too. They did that to me too. Oh, me too. Those plea deals. I didn't understand what a plea deal was. I was very confused. They explained to me that what happens is they throw every single charge they possibly can at you so that you are facing an unbelievable amount of time. In Kenneth's case, he was looking at life in prison. And they said, if you want to go to court and fight this, you can. But if you lose, you get life. Or you can take a plea deal right now and take 17 years. Now, for some people, those who actually do commit crimes, this is a good deal. They'll say, you know what, I deserve life, but I'll take 17 years. However, in Kenneth's case, he said, I'm not going to spend the next 17 years of my life in jail over a stupid, drunken mistake. So he said he wanted to fight it. And they said, Okay, but just so you know, the trial might take up to 3 years, and it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. This is why Kenneth was so distraught. He was so beat up and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have the money to fight this case, and he was afraid that he was going to get a public defender who was more interested in taking the plea deal because they had a whole list of other clients they had to get through. He thought that his only option was to take the plea deal. Everybody in class erupted. They started going, no, you gotta fight that, man, you gotta fight that. I was intrigued by this, and I went home that night and I researched famous cases of plea deals. The most famous case was this guy. He accepted a plea deal to Rikers Island prison. He pled guilty to a crime he didn't commit. He was facing astronomical charges and thought it was best that he just take the plea deal instead of fighting it. However, being thrown in such a horrifying place as jail, and then thinking about his future as a felon with a record, he couldn't take it, and he ended up committing suicide. I did not want this for Kenneth. So I went up to him and I said, hey, I don't know how I can support you, but just know I'm in your corner for this. Anything I can do, I'm happy to help. Kenneth said that he had gotten so much support from just telling his story that it inspired him to fight the case. His sister had to take out a second mortgage on the very house that this whole thing happened at in order for him to pay for the lawyer. Now, right away, some people aren't that lucky. They don't have a connection to those kind of financial resources, so they just have to take the deal. But luckily, Kenneth did. He had family by his side who said they were willing to help him out as well. So he began the process of fighting it. The trial ended up taking a total of 1.5 years. Kenneth ended up becoming my teacher's assistant through the whole thing, so I was able to hear the play-by-play every single day. It turns out that not only did he have to fight this case despite the fact that the charges were dropped, the family whose house he broke into in the first place agreed to testify on his behalf. Now, you'd imagine that the trial would just stop there, but it didn't. It kept going, and Kenneth had to fight and fight and fight. And the closer it came to decision time, the more terrified Kenneth was, because if he lost this, he lost his entire life. The good news is, Kenneth won. Well, sort of. After the judge heard the whole case, heard Kenneth's story, heard the testimony of the people whose house he broke into, they agreed they were going to drop the charges to just being drunk and disorderly, breaking and entering, and give him what's called time served, which means that they were just going to take the amount of time he'd already been in jail and consider it his sentence. Now, unfortunately, Kenneth still has a record because of this. He's currently working on getting it expunged in the next 5 years so he can get it taken off permanently. And even with his college degree, he's still finding it a little difficult to find good work despite his record. However, he did say because he was able to be so vocal about his story, whoever he tells, he gets a lot of great support for it. Now, unfortunately, Kenneth still had to lose 1.5 years of his life in jail because of this. But some people aren't as lucky as him. Some people don't have the financial means to fight this kind of thing. Some people don't have the family to fight this kind of thing. So unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are in jail and are innocent and have pled guilty because they just couldn't fight the system the way it is. I normally don't do this, but I'm going to give a shameless plug to an America's Got Talent video. You can check the link right here. This is an example of another man who couldn't fight the system. He spent nearly 2 decades in prison and was released after DNA evidence proved him innocent. I highly encourage you to watch the film and understand that this man's story is hundreds and hundreds of people's stories who are incarcerated. What it taught me is that not everything is black and white. Our society has a way of going, look, you're a prisoner, you're a good guy. You're the hero, you're the bad guy. And if you did something wrong, you probably deserved it. I mean, look, all Kenneth did was make one drunken mistake. And if you're a fan of my channel and have seen any of the first season of The Manifesto, you know that I have made more than enough stupid mistakes that should have landed me in exactly his position. But it's not worth losing my life over. And it wasn't worth him losing his. Thankfully, despite all the odds being against him, he was able to share his story and get encouragement. This is my hope for you. I want to tell you the same thing that I told Kenneth. Share your story. Regardless of whether people will believe it or not, if you have a truth that is inside of you that you are dying to get out, speak it with all of your might. At the end of the day, that's what I teach people as an acting teacher. I teach them to share their truth with conviction, because conviction is contagious. And when you tell people your story, it gives them an opportunity to see life through your eyes. And just like with Kenneth, there might be those who don't believe you. There might be a system that's put up against you. But when you share your truth openly and vulnerably, and only then can they see where you're coming from and what you've been through. I call it empathy in action. At the end of the day, your story is the most powerful tool you have. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dominic Syracuse, and remember, this machine kills fascists. Hey guys, hope you liked the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if the subject in this video is important to you, check out the description. I've left the link for the GoFundMe for the nonprofit that I work for that teaches acting in prison. If you click the link, you can help us out, and it would mean the world to us. Thank you so much.